Well, welcome, Tim, to Unusual Attitudes.
Thank you.
So, we're here on the floor of I Am Phenom,
Yeah.
2025, and ending the week in Philly. It's been very, very interesting. But my first question for you, obviously you're extremely well known in the industry. Your voice, your opinion, your advice gets around a lot. But maybe some folks actually don't know, who is Tim Sackett?
Yeah, my wife calls me a micro influencer.
Right.
She's like, there's like 13 HR ladies in the world that know you and like want a picture, which I think is comical because it is like, when people think of like influencer, they think of a Kardashian and it's millions and millions of people. And when you get into a space like ours, it might be tens of thousands of whatever, but like that's still a pretty big audience for a small industry, right? And we tend to know that. So I actually own and run a technical staffing firm. And so I have like this full-time day job where I still run a recruiting team, right? And we make 500 plus hires a year and blah, blah, blah. And so, but also I got into like writing and speaking. And then, so you have these two kind of parallel paths where someone goes, oh, you're an analyst, you're an influencer, whatever. And then you're like, and I'm still this practitioner, which I think lends some credibility because there's so many of those that are like, oh, I went full-time influencer and I haven't really even tried to recruit somebody in a decade. And you're like, oh, but you're still telling people how to recruit somebody. So like I literally started right out of college recruiting. My mom owned a staffing firm, the one that I own and run now. And so like nepotism at its best. But like what people don't know, like the inside story is about 8 years into my career with her, is she was like, you need to leave. Like, because I was, you get young and cocky and in the staffing world, you're making money and you're like, and so I'm trying to push her out. She's like, no, my company, I run it, you don't. And so literally I'd gotten my master's in HR, had a mentor that was at General Motors that was head of HR. And I really thought my career was going to go straight HR. I was going to go corporate, go HR. And so that's how I started. But the pull of recruiting kept pulling me back. Like I would go, and I loved HR, but like to me, recruiting was easy. I'm like, gosh, you love your company. You get along with these hiring managers. If you really truly like care about the company you work for, it's the easiest sell in the world. And like, you're just talking people into like, oh my gosh, you should come work here. This is amazing. And that infectious, I think, kind of attitude resonates with executives in the corporate world. And so I would get into board meetings and there would always be TA challenges. And I was always like, oh, I can solve that. Like, I know how to do that. And so then you get yanked over here and you get back and forth. My last corporate TA gig, I was running TA for a large health system and I got a call, mom had a heart attack. And she was like, look, I can't do this anymore. And so I said, all right, I'll come back. And it was probably the best thing that ever happened because you go from young and cocky, you get into the corporate world, which is very political, very level, you have to really kind of be savvy around that. And so when I came back, I was actually prepared to actually run the company. I wasn't before. I thought I was because you're young and cocky. And then you kind of go through and get the experience and you go, okay, now I know.
You start to get it.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different. When you make that decision to come back, is there any regret to what you might have left behind? Because I find your career path fascinating, just sort of on the resume part. It looks like you're kind of going the corporate direction, and then there's just this sort of U-turn, right back down. Like, do you regret that at all in the direction you took?
I think there's always a little bit of I don't know if it's regret or envy when I see people that, like some of my closest friends, like Chris Dunn is the CHRO at Marriott, like he's my best friend, and you see somebody get to that role and you go, oh, I could do that as well. And so there's a little envy, I don't think regret, because like I have such freedom in running like my own company now and being able to come and do things like this and write and say what I want. and like that's part of my personality that I think is really hard to turn off. So I don't think like a corporate leadership role I was ever necessarily destined to, or it would have to be the right culture from that standpoint. So I do work with so many enterprise TA leaders to help them in their shops and stuff like that. So I still get to get involved with a lot of that, which I really enjoy.
So that's tangential too, because I tried the corporate gig for a little while here in Philly. I worked for a big healthcare company, health insurance company, and great people. And it was, it was awesome being part of that community, but there was always something for me that I just don't fit here. And I think a lot of it is just the politics of it all.
For sure.
The freedom to be able to move around and maybe be a little bit more of my own decision maker. And it's for some and not for others. Which really, let's talk about being in recruiting and what's changed, because now you have this, you were inside for a little while, you've been outside for probably longer than that now. What changes have you seen over the course of your career in recruiting? What have been the big things that have changed?
The reality is it's the technology and automation of it there's always every layer, right? We went from, internet to mobile to, and like you just see this kind of this nonstop evolution of automation, which again should give us more capacity, should do this. In reality, we know what it does is it gives us more candidates to plow through, harder decisions to make, the complexity kind of increases. But that, the reality is it's that the speed of it, I think continues just to increase. And we see this now with obviously the AI stuff, right? And I've always been one that hates time to fill as a metric. I think it's the worst metric ever. And yet 99% of the world uses it as a success metric. I think it's a health metric, not a success metric, but we are challenged on the speed thing constantly, and it just gets faster and faster. And you're like, well, how fast is too fast when we start to impact quality, right? Like just because I can fill a position in 7 days doesn't mean I should, but like sometimes our executives and our operations people are like, well, wait a minute, because they, how it is. It's like, well, no, we want fast, we want amazing quality, and we want it cheap. You're like, we can't have all this,
Not at the same time. So what are some of when you look at the measurements of success? Because they have changed, right? They've changed, I think, because in part, not I think, that for sure, because technology is giving us access to new sets of data.
For sure.
So what would you say are better measures of success?
Well, I'm always a funnel person because I want to know what's actually being done. And part of the reason I want to measure the funnel is ultimately, to me, the holy grail of all success metric for TA is going to be a capacity metric. When my executive comes to me and says, hey, in the fourth quarter, we need to increase hiring by 25%, I need to be able to tell them I can either do that for real, or I can't. Right now what happens is like, oh my gosh, for sure, we'll do this. We'll work 24/7, you don't worry. And then they fail and they get fired. I mean, we see this in the industry all the time. If I know my funnel metrics, I can tell you exactly, hey, I'm at 95% capacity for our team. I can give you 5%, which is gonna equal to this many positions. If you want us to increase that by 25%, here's exactly the resources I need. Now, sales, marketing, finance, all those people are like, oh yeah, that should be table stakes. But we've never done that in TA. We've just oh, we'll work harder. Working harder is not a strategy. And so to me, having the data to be able to go back and tell my executive team, hey, here's exactly where we're at, and here's what we can actually produce. And then you get into things like, quality of source, quality of spend to source, things like that. Like again, like the data will tell us, we constantly go, when I run into a TA shop, we'll take a look at some of the data and you're like, oh, so your number one spend for source is here, but it's actually your 5th best source. And no one's like, they're like, oh, but
nobody's questioning that.
But we could never get rid of this number one source. And you're like, yes, you could, really,
Well, you see that a lot now. I mean, love to hear your comments on just the job board industry and kind of that transformation. I think it's been really challenging. Obviously, you had Career Builder and Monster. You're starting to see this consolidation, and I'm going to add others to that list this year and next year. They're going to consolidate, and it's coalescing into what's going to be one entity, and then it's going to go away, I think. And how do you see sourcing? So you talk about funnel. Sourcing is always a huge part of that conversation. How should organizations be looking at sourcing in an environment that's giving them better access to sources through technologies?
The answer to that question 12 months ago is different than the answer today. Because of the AI stuff, I think we're quickly becoming a function that we're going to have like this big capacity. And so whether that is little by little going to equal to 30, 40, 50, 60, 70% of that tactical work being gone, I truly think there's a disconnect. If I go to the CEO, not your CEO, because they're a different level. But if I go to an average Fortune 500 CEO and say, how does talent come into your organization? They truly believe that we as TA leaders and practitioners are going out and hunting for the best talent. They don't really understand that we post a job, we hire the best of the people who apply, and in reality that actually could be the worst talent in your market. So we're hiring the best of the worst. Now again, we get lucky sometimes, hire great people. So if I'm truly looking at, well, what is this strategic work? What's this higher level work that we can do? I want hunters. I want snipers. I want to go out and actually source and know what the best talent is in our market. And so am I going to get that off a job board? Maybe, probably not. It's a waste of a resource.
It's a waste of a lot of time too.
Yeah, like I literally need to go out and actually know who I'm going after. And again, it's labor intensive, it's time intensive. And AI can be layered into that to help, because you're going to get all that automation of reaching out and getting people who are interested and stuff like that. But you still have to go find, and that's a lot of individual conversations, it's a lot of relationships. It's almost like going back 2 or 3 decades ago to recruiting. But again, I go back when I talk to CEOs, there's this big disconnect of what they think is happening in recruiting and what's really happening.
So how important is it now for organizations to actually be building their own database of sources, right? Like, there's all these tools out there. I have found job boards for at least for the last decade. I still think there's a usefulness to that. And don't get me wrong,
for sure.
Especially if you're, I always say, job boards are a scalpel, a surgical knife versus a broad axe, right? For certain things, you're running an event, a campaign, you have a really specialized role that you may need for the first time. There's
there's not one source to top of funnel.
No.
There's so many. So like you have to have all of them turned on.
Yeah, exactly. But how important now is that, because you're renting, I always look at it as you're renting versus buying.
Yeah.
Buying takes some time, it takes a discipline, it takes a skill, but buying is permanent, right?
Yeah.
I've bought that, and not that we buy and sell people, but building that profile internally, you can own that information versus renting it from someone else. And how important is it now for companies to be looking at sourcing and saying, you need to be building this for yourself, at least for 90% of what you do?
Yeah. It is interesting because we went through decades of, like I literally have implemented 10 different ATSs in my career, right? And it was always the concept early on, like you talk about 2 decades ago, was always like, well, maybe we just start from scratch because that database we had is just filled with junk. And because the searching capabilities and the data, and there was limited space and it cost money and all of this stuff. And now you're like going, like a large language model, like a GPT or whatever has like everything in the internet. So you're like, why wouldn't I have an entire database of every single thing? Even if a candidate, like I never even talked to, why wouldn't I throw them in the database? You never know, right? Especially with contextual search and all this other stuff that's going on, you should be building giant databases. And I go back, I think we trail sales and marketing in so many aspects in what we do here. And I look at some of the best lead gen people I know in the industry, and they're literally building these databases of millions and millions of people because it's inexpensive. The searching and ability to manipulate those databases and compartmentalize them and everything else just gets more powerful. And you're like, so why wouldn't you be building this giant database? I've talked to a couple like industry kind of insider folks that are like, look, at the end of the day, like they feel like in any single market, they could probably give you a database today that has 85% of the available talent in that market. And I'm like, holy crap! Like that's
huge.
That's like, oh my gosh! Like how And so again, as a talent TA leaders, that should be then our goal of like, how do we get all the talent in our marketplace? Even if I'm like a health system, and you're like, well, I don't need electrical engineers or mechanics or whatever. So like maybe they are married to somebody you need or whatever, right? There's all these reasons.
That secondary or tertiary market that you might have access to.
Yeah.
So how does, we're here this week, talking about a lot of product releases, and obviously the big thing on everyone's mind, and the conversation that is happening all day now, everywhere, not just here, is agentic technologies, or what we're calling applied AI, right?
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about how you're approaching those conversations with CEOs, CHROs, CPOs and CTOs that you talk to every day.
Yeah, there's still a lot of nervousness, right? Because I think part of it is you're nervous when you're it's hard to say uneducated, but when you don't have all the knowledge of what's really going on, it's moving so fast. If you're not on it every single day, you're not going to. And a CHRO, a head of talent, practitioners who are still fighting fires are not going to necessarily be able to educate themselves as fast as what they have to. And so, again, there's complexity around language because the marketing is like, oh, it's a co-pilot, it's an agent, it's a this. And you're like, okay, well, what's really the difference? It's one of the things I think I love what Phenom is doing because I think there's you guys saw early on. One is like the products that you guys have released. I mean, you're head and shoulders out in front of a lot of the industry, and so you're like, hey, we have to actually educate. We have to let people know what this is and what it's not. I can go into a group of CHROs and say, hey, who's using AI every single day? And out of 100, maybe 5, 6, 7 will raise their hand. When in reality, you and I know 100% of them are using AI every day.
Yep.
They don't even know it.
They don't know it.
And so they're like, my legal team says we can't use AI. I'm like, your legal team is using AI. Right. Like, you're using AI every day.
You're building your products with.
Here's the AI you're using. Here's what you think you're doing. And when you start to like really break it down and show them, they're afraid, right, that the AI is going to be biased or say something it shouldn't or whatever. And you're like, no, you don't understand. Like these private language models are built, they're incapable of doing this. And then they have other mechanisms and guardrails that are making sure that this wouldn't happen, and especially like in the conversational AI models, right? And so like being able to educate them, and then when they see it and they can visualize it, all of a sudden they're like, oh, well, we can use this. And I can go to my legal team and I can go to my security team and tell them this is exactly, because even IT teams don't necessarily have the knowledge they need. And so they just immediately shut us down. And you go, no, that's not the case, right? And like all of this is an education for everybody in the organization. Like it's so new. And we tend to believe that our legal teams and our IT teams know more than we do. And I'm like, what I find is that's just not the case.
Yeah, and it is part of the overall discourse, right? Like in the conversation, 2 years ago was, here's Gen AI, just start using it.
Oh yeah.
It's sort of that broad brush
And we
stroke.
had crazy examples of bad stuff, because what happens if you take a toddler and you just said, hey, now you know the internet? Well, gosh, there's a really bad stuff on the internet,
Right.
But if you took a toddler and said, hey, we're specifically going to teach you the best things in the world, and that's it, you would have this amazing toddler.
Yep.
And we just didn't do that.
Yeah, well, and I think we're evolving, right? What we're learning and what is resonating with people right now is the use case, right? Boiling it down to, okay, let's be more specific about where these technologies, and that's why we're calling it applied AI. Let's apply it to a use case, start there, because the other thing, and maybe you're hearing this, we certainly talked about this in the analyst day, we talk about piloting. Or prototyping. And in the SaaS industry, that was a really bad thing to do, because it's very hard to pilot a platform.
Yes.
But these use cases, you bring in an agent or a version of applied AI, you can pilot it, small group, get a little bit of success out of it, and go, okay, this is safe, because it's the first thing that we're confronting right now is the safety factor, and then we're starting to demonstrate the return on that investment. And I really don't like using ROI as a measure, but I like calling it productivity measures, because that's really what we're trying to get to. So talk a little bit about how you're having the conversation around measurement of these tools.
Well, I want to start with the use case thing. I think is super important, because it's the one thing we hear constantly is people do, well, just tell me exactly how I can use this right now in my process. Right. And I think that's where, like, again, how we build out this agentic AI and these agents, and being able to let people customize this process the way it feels right for them, and they can wear the human layered in and where all that fits. And like a great use case is like, again, to be able to test. Because I think the only things we never did was A/B test in TA or HR. We just didn't really have a great way to do it. And so if you go, hey, how about we take this one location, this one job family, and we turn an agent on to help anti-ghosting. We're gonna just have this agent talk to these people every single day until they show up day one, right? And then we'll do this other location, we won't do it. And let's measure then the differences, right? Of what happens here. Is it a 10% no-show rate versus a 50% no-show rate, and all these other things. Now you can easily do these things. And so I think that becomes the power of people going, oh, because you and I both know is like, once you turn that on and show that it works for one thing, everybody else will go, oh, I want that now, right? And little by little, versus this kind of like decade-old process of TA where we go, hey, we're gonna build this process, and then on Monday, we're gonna jam it on top of everybody, whether it works or not. And then they're like, we don't get adoption. And you're like, okay, well, how do we do better in getting everybody to have this adoption? And again, I think with the agents is, it's not necessarily, it's the issue of, if I have a recruiter that says, well, I just don't want to use that agent for this thing. Okay, well, if we know it's more productive, then why wouldn't you turn this on? And how do we know that? And all of those things. So once you turn it on, it's full. You don't have it's a full adoption.
Yeah,
So
and I think you're bringing up a good point about measurement of software in general. Like adoption has always been the pinnacle measure, the KPI, like how many people are actually using the system.
Yeah.
But nobody's really asking what are they using it for? Because I could log into a system every day and it looks like adoption's great.
Yeah.
But like in a lot of these more modern platforms, how many automations are you running? How many emails are you sending or SMS out of the system? Are you connecting through WhatsApp? Like what's the type of communication you're having? How many events are you running?
Yeah.
So all these other non-adoption, they're just activity, task-based things that are you doing. Do you think that's going to be even more important with these applied AI, with these agentic? Like how much is it really helping you with? But you and I were talking earlier before we started the interview about, but then what are you doing with all the time you're saving?
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
I think that's the big nervousness of everybody is you turn this stuff on and immediately, like when I'm going through and seeing everything that Phenom's building and every piece of the process that you could have, an agent do, and they're going to do it 24/7 and they're going to do it perfectly. You all of a sudden go, you immediately, if you really know what you're doing as a practitioner, go, oh, okay, so I don't have to do that and that and that. Like, wait a minute, what do I do? And when you spent your entire career just doing this process and fighting these fires every single day, we don't know what to do. And I don't think TA leaders do, I don't know, CHROs, and we just keep telling them, now you can do the strategic work. But then you go back and if you really sit down and brainstorm it, there's some really, really cool, high value things that we can do that only humans can do. And I think those are the things that we have to really start to educate and have conversation around. Because if you don't, you and I both know the CFO is just gonna go, give me some heads, right? All this work went away, I need heads. And you're like, okay. And you guys have had some customers too that, that spoke up and said, hey, like, there's always gonna be some change in workforce. But we also know that with every kind of automation, every kind of new, technology, you have an invention of so many jobs that are there as well. And so again, what could those things be? And I take a look at it and go, like imagine like an interview process. Right now, we just call somebody, we schedule an interview, they show up. We don't really put any time into thinking, this person, Cliff, that's coming, what's Cliff really into? How do we wow Cliff? At the same time, we're still measuring Cliff, but at the same time, we also want to get you interested in us. We want to like attract you, because if we're hunting you for best talent, and you have multiple places you can go to work, how are we creating a process where you go, holy crap, I've never been wanted like this ever in my life? Right now, we don't have the capacity. We literally schedule the interview and we go on to the next thing. We don't even think about Cliff ever again. Right. But if you showed up and you had the welcome sign and you had this and we knew what your favorite soda was or water or coffee or whatever, all of a sudden you're like, holy, like I've never been wanted like this in my life. To me, that's the high touch, high value, high strategy, because now you're landing the top talent in your market for your company. And at the end of the day, I only think TA, like our only goal should be increasing the talent in the organization. That's just it. It's a simple sentence. And if I'm doing that, then I'm adding value to the company.
Yeah. So it's really about how do we connect better? Like removing the tools is great, removing all those redundant tasks, and some of them are actually really important, like the engagement piece, like you said, turning on an agent that's going to help someone stay engaged throughout the process and remove that black hole. That's really good. But that space also needs to be filled with that personal human connection.
Yep.
So I'm going to transition to that from that, because I think this is a really important topic. Just about you and maybe me a little bit. We're kind of known for being, very opinionated. And maybe a little bit transparent. Some people would call us blunt or whatever. So talk about, I find that to be, it's refreshing to me, right? Because at least I understand where someone stands. Talk to me about the safety that I think people try to retreat to in some of these. They can be very difficult conversations. You're talking with leaders all the time. I doubt highly you're not transparent with a leader and say, here's what I see. Like, take it or don't take it, but this is what's happening, at least from my experience. How important is it that we become a little bit more transparent, not offensive, but more transparent, so that we can share ideas that deeply affect what's happening in our industry?
It's super hard. I want to tell somebody they can be courageous, but the reality is like I can do this because I run my own shop. I don't have to worry about being fired, and thus I can still pay my mortgage. And so I'm always cautious to say, hey, you should just go out and give your opinion, because
and then they're like, Tim, I need a job.
You and I both know there's leaders that just aren't capable of taking that, and they're just going to fire the person, right? So you're just like, I don't want anybody to ever like not be able to pay their bills.
Yeah.
So my advice to them is way more conservative than myself, because I'm not worried about being fired. And now, if you're not worried about being fired, cool, go give your opinion and do that. You and I both know, we've been around leaders long enough that it's the one thing that when I was on the corporate side and I had these unique opportunities to actually travel with a lot of executives, they would always go, "You are unlike any other HR person we've ever seen." And it wasn't negative, it was a positive, but even then I wasn't worried about being fired. I always knew I had the skill set, I could get a job someplace else. And so I was willing to give my opinion and share that. Again, not trying to be offensive.
Sure.
And nobody else was. It was always this cautious, whitewash kind of thing. Like, I have this great story. I would travel on the corporate jet with the CEO and like COO, and so like one time, like the CEO, like we had went out for cocktails like after, right? As you do for dinner. Probably had too many. Probably shared an opinion a little too abrupt. Maybe the F word was thrown around. And the next morning we get up, I see him down in the hotel lobby for coffee, and the CEO goes, "Again, tell the CEO to F off today." And I'm like, "No, but it's early. It's early."
It can always happen.
You don't know.
Yeah.
And like later in the week, I'm in the HR office, and I'm in my office. I can see down the hallway. CEO's coming in, walks into the HR office. I didn't think he knew where the HR office was, right? Walks into my office and closes the door. And in my mind, I'm thinking, all right,
This is it.
You bid it. Good job, buddy. You bought it. Good job. Keep your mouth open. And he literally sat down and he's like, "Hey, tell me what you saw at the stores this week." And I'm like, he goes, "If you're willing to tell me to F off, you're going to give me an unvarnished, clear opinion of what's going on out in the field." So there's always that positive and negative of like, hey, I don't think our CEOs are getting enough of that. They're getting this washed version every single time. And they don't have, again, who was it? I think it was McNeely yesterday that said,
on stage, yeah.
like, you can be the therapist for the CEO, right? Like, you can, because they need this. They can't talk to anyone. They can't go to people underneath them or to the board members and go, "I'm struggling right now. I don't know what to do." And so, but HR, they treat us like we're legal. So you have this like great insight to be able to go and have that conversation. And I think you could do that. Again, you have to have a little courage,
Yeah.
you know.
You do, and I think we need more of it. And you can dip your toe into that water, and you don't have to be controversial. You don't have to bring up, some of the, the more challenging subjects, but talk about what you know, right? And your opinion, if it's based on some data and your experience, and you bring that and you explain the position. But I think it's a skill that not enough people are exercising. And I'm getting to the point, which is, this is something that AI cannot replace.
No.
And we need more people that understand that level of communication. And if you have that, you will be invaluable to your organization.
Yeah.
But it takes time to develop it, and you have to start doing it.
Yeah. People always kind of rip on me because they think like I'm like this big like in-office return to work person, because I kind of come back, I kind of throw back at it, right? You have this big return or kind of remote work culture, and I'm like, hey, I'm all for that, but I believe there's 10% of the workforce that actually is more productive working remotely. Right. I think vast majority are probably somewhere in between. They want more freedom, they want some flexibility, but most people, they're more directed when they're in the office. Yep. And we just see that. We see productivity measures. But like so many people just don't have that lack of understanding, so they go, "Oh, I want to work at home." Cool. But at the end of the day, you have to understand what you're good at, what you're not good at, and being able to kind of run through that. So I think it's well,
important. There's a really good study. Microsoft actually did it during the pandemic. They studied like 650 companies and said, yes, people were productive with the job they knew how to do, but innovation dropped by 25%.
And it's the relationship side too, right? Yeah. It's like you and I both know, it's like the time, it's one thing to go, hey, I'm working remotely, you're working remotely, like we can jump on a Zoom call anytime, but you don't. Yeah. But if I'm in the office and you stop down to talk to me about something, and then that sparks another idea in a conversation, or it's the meeting after the meeting, all of those things, like that's where true innovation happens. And again, like AI can't replace that. Like that's the big piece of this that I think, again, younger workers are missing as well. Like again, if you know your job, you can go work remotely and do that job. If you're a younger worker and you don't know any job, and you're first working for a company and you want to move up quickly,
You got to be there.
Get in the office.
You have to be there. You have to. Because a lot of that moving up or moving across organizations is the people that you meet and know and get to learn about their organizations, and they get to learn about you. So you have that opportunity. So my last question for you really is, I think everyone would turn to Tim Sackett and say, what's next? Like, what is actually happening in this industry right now? Where do you think this is all headed?
It's going to be unique. I think for the vast majority of people, you're going to start to see AI layered into the solutions you have. You don't have to go necessarily buy AI. You're going to have a partner like Phenom that's going to show you, hey, here's exactly how this AI is going to work, and it's going to be layered in. So there's not like this big shopping extravaganza that has to go on. You're going to see it happen, and it's going to happen fairly quickly, right? And like, again, you can be an early adopter, you can wait around and see what happens. The people that adopt early, again, exponentially, you're going to see them move way, way faster than anybody else. And now all of a sudden, you're going to see executive team. We already see this, whether that's marketing, sales, operations. It's not just our function; it's every single function across the organization. So, what I love to see is like leaders of HR, leaders of talent, kind of being those kind of digital natives to go out and say, hey, we're willing to be the guinea pig first. Like, let's get in here. Let's do this. Because the faster we can move, that's going to happen. At the same time, we're creating a brand new TA, a brand new HR, a brand new whatever. You have to simultaneously be answering those questions and doing that work. You're going to turn on the AI stuff, cool, take that win, but you also are creating what the future of TA is going to look like. And it's going to be more relationships, it's going to be higher touch, it's going to be all those things that AI can't do. And for everybody, that's going to be a little bit different. It's where do you want your human layered in? What does that look like? But it's super exciting. I mean, I can't remember, I tried to equate it to like mobile, like as a technological advancement. And you're like, it's so far beyond that. Like mobile did this little thing, we all kind of got involved, and now we all have, a cell phone with us at all times. But this is literally going to be like having expert assistants around us all the time. And we don't even know what that looks like yet. Yeah. And so it's transformational, it's super hopeful, I'm excited. I'm not scared at all, because I trust that we're going to be able to create so much more now.
Yeah. I think it's a great opportunity. Yeah. It's a great way to end it.
Cool.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yep.